Hello, my name is Mike. I'm a longtime gamer, math teacher, and math graduate student, and I'm here today to talk about randomness in Hearthstone. The community, and especially the video Kriparian put out yesterday, seem to think that randomness is this terrible thing that has infested Hearthstone, and I don't quite agree. I'd like to make an argument to the contrary. To begin with, we have to agree on some baseline ideas. Why is that? Well, let's pretend we wanted to discuss our favorite flavors of ice cream. And I sat down on the table and said, yeah, well, my favorite make of car is Toyota. You'd look at me like I'm crazy. What am I adding to the conversation? I might be wrong, I might be right, but regardless of that, I'm not helping us discuss ice cream. So here we're discussing Hearthstone. There's a few facts about Hearthstone and one fact about people we all need to accept. About Hearthstone, some randomness is good. If you disagree with that, I'm going to say Hearthstone's not the game for you. There's Go, there's chess, there are games that have no randomness that are great games, and again, that's the card discussion versus the ice cream discussion. Go play those games and have a great time with them. Hearthstone has randomness. It is a card game, it must have randomness. Also, some skill is good. We're not sitting here flipping a coin to see who wins. We're not playing war with a 52 card deck of cards. We want to be able to make choices, which is how our skill comes up, to impact the game and to, have some skill. Enjoy playing with that skill. Again, it comes in choices, but it's also worth noting that not all choices are skillful. There are trivial choices. Do I want to put a 1 mana 1/1 in my deck or a 1 mana 4/4? Obviously, that's not a real choice, but even if it existed, it wouldn't be a real choice, right? So those are the two facts about Hearthstone we have to accept. Also, we have to accept that people are bad at probability. I'm going to list a few examples of this. Feel free to Google them if you'd like to look into them. I find them interesting, but I'm a math guy. So first of all, a while back, people started complaining to Apple that their iPod Shuffle was not random enough. I'm not getting the song I want enough. So what did Apple do? They made it deterministic, which is less random, and they made it play all the songs. And then people were happy because it was now felt more random, but it was actually less random. Because again, randomness will have streaks. If you flip a coin and you get heads, tail, heads, tail, heads, tail, heads, tail, heads, tail, heads, tail, you should see if the person's cheating, because that's not how randomness works. There's a old game show, Let's Make a Deal. It's also called the Monty Hall problem if you want to look it up. There's 3 doors. One of them has a great prize, the other 2 have nothing. You pick a door. The host then knows where there's no prize and flips a door around that has no prize. Says, there's no prize here. Would you like to switch or keep your door? Well, does it matter? Is it better to switch? Is it better to keep your door? This is a famous problem. Again, think about it. The answer is kind of counterintuitive. There's also the birthday problem. If we put 30 people, say, in a room, what are the odds that 2 people share a birthday? We just mean the month and then the day of the month, not year or anything. Again, very counterintuitive. Much higher than most people would expect unless you've actually read about it, learned about it. And then here's a kind of more number-involved example. Say there's a disease that affects half a percent of the population. And we've got a test that will, if you have it, identify it correctly 95% of the time. But this test also has a 2% false positive rate. So you go to the doctor, you get a result that says you have this disease. What are the chances you have it? How worried should you be? Counterintuitive solution again. The point is that people are bad at judging probability on the surface. I don't blame people. I think even within groups of mathematicians, you'll find people that cannot judge these with intuition and have to actually go in and run the numbers to figure it out. There's nothing wrong with that. But let's accept it for what it is and not do what's the odds, what's the probability based on our feelings, because they're wrong. So anyway, on to Hearthstone. We've got all these Discover cards. Well, first, I guess we've got Yogg-Saron here. He was kind of the big floodgate for randomness in my mind. Before this came out, I argued with multiple people that this was actually a really good card because the randomness was not that big of a deal. If you got 8 or 10 spells, you were going to get a positive net result. Now, would you get the best result? Not most of the time. But most of the time, you will get a positive result. Maybe it was a Call of the Wild or a Flame Strike, or a lot of the other spells that only benefited you. If you get 10 of them, the chances that you get 10 that are bad for you are really low. And then sometimes you can actually get these crazy highlight reel blowouts. Anyway, that's kind of, I think, where it started. But I want to stress that Yogg-Saron I don't think was high variance randomness in those situations. It was when you got one or two spells. But when you got a lot more spells, you could count on it to be good a very high percentage of the time. Now, in current time, we're looking at Discover. We're looking at randomness. Some people say that these Discover cards are just too good. Yet when I look at Arena and I compare Primordial Glyph to Meteor, Meteor's higher. When I look at Arena and I compare the collection of Discover cards, I realize there's some that are not too good here. There's others that are pretty good. When I compare these to another subset of cards, let's say Taunts, let's say Divine Shields, well, the Divine Shields might actually be higher on average. We'd have to have really bad luck to get 3 bad Divine Shields. I mean, what's our worst case? Argent Squire, Silverman Guardian, and Scarlet Crusader, all of which are playable cards? That's not bad. Those two aren't. I mean, we've got some pretty good odds of getting a good Divine Shield. I mentioned Taunts. Realize that some of these don't count as actual taunts. Oh, we'd be terrified if we got a Paladin taunt. It looks like we're gonna have, if we pick a subgroup of non-vanilla cards, above average results. The same is true for Discover, and I don't think Discover is higher than a lot of these others. And in Constructed, if we look at Discover, most of those are not even played. You know, some of them got a little bit of niche play, but for the most part, these cards are not ones that are played very regularly. But some are played, some are good. Some cards of any subgroup are good. But how random are these cards? Well, let's just talk about Primordial Glyph. It seems to be one of the biggest offenders. How random is this? Well, to do this, we're going to use what's called the hypergeometric distribution. Up here you can see this. If we have 2 good cards out of our 31 total mage spells, we're actually going to see one of those 2 good cards 19% of the time, say Flame Strike and Meteor. You've got an almost 20% chance, 1 in 5, of getting a good board clear from this glyph. That is pretty low. That's still kind of coin flippy. What if there's 6 good cards? What if we add Fireball, Glyph, Tome, and Firelines Portal to it? Something up to 50%. What if we had another few cards? Blizzard, Polymorph, Pyroblast, Volcanic Potion, AI. Now we're up to 75%? And there's still good cards left. Frostbolt, Cone of Cold, Ice Block, Greater Arcane Missiles, up to 88%? There's other cards that might be better than these even, just depending on the situation, right? So I don't think this is high variance. I think this is actually pretty consistent. The ones that are played, the Discover cards that are played, are actually ones that are high consistency, such as Primordial Glyph, such as Stonehill Defender, such as Hydrologist, such as Ivory Knight. Realize how small the pool for Hydrologist actually is. Such as Shadow Visions. This card has increased consistency and lowered variance by being a Discover card. You can get Silence more reliably. You can get Inner Fire more reliably. Just want everyone to think about that and let it sink in. So, are these cards that bad? Well, I don't really think so. Now let's compare Primordial Glyph and Arena to Meteor. Let's say you draft a Meteor. Your decision is, when do I cast it and what do I cast it on? Okay, let's say you draft Primordial Glyph. Your decision is, first, when do I cast Primordial Glyph? It does take 2 mana. If you place on turn 2, you lose tempo. And then what do I choose? It's not always right to choose Meteor. You can't just say, Meteor, take it. Sometimes you want Reach because you know that's all you need to win the game. Sometimes you want to Freeze because it's better to freeze than to kill 2 of their 4 minions. Yeah, you can kill 2 if they actually play around it. So maybe you got to pick something else. Sometimes even Arcane Explosion might be better just due to mana cost. And, well, after you get that meteor, if you get that meteor, you still have to choose what to target when to play it. So, which one takes more skill? I think the glyph does. And the glyph's rated lower on the arena lists. Now, I talk about choice. Choice is not always more skill. Sometimes choice actually lowers skill. There's not a straight relationship here. Skill can be a function of your choices, as in, here's a choice, does this choice add or lower skill, how much does it add? But it's not inherently related. An example, let's say you have a Doomguard, a Flame Imp, and a Soulfire in your hand, and the opponent's at 9 health. What do you play? You could choose what to discard. You Soulfire their face, discard the Flame Imp, and then play your Doomguard. Okay, you're too low to play the Flame Imp, let's say. But when it's random, we've got to start thinking about other things. We've got to start thinking about, well, what burn do they have left? What burn do I have left? What taunts do they have in their deck? Because I might know what their deck is if I'm going to construct it, especially. You start thinking, what signals do they give me with their earlier plays? What do I think is that last card in their hand? Maybe it's better to go for the 50-50 because you might just lose next turn because you know that they can life tap and then they're going to surely get something or whatever. Or maybe you go for the Doomguard and discard the Soulfire, hit the face, and then threaten lethal next turn and demand them to have an answer because you think they're out of answers. This is a much richer decision. So, we've got some low variance random cards. I think that Discover in general is usually like that, but as the pool widens, then that changes. When you start having a lot more cards available, it becomes higher variance. When you have even less cards available, it becomes lower variance. When you see these cards that have a whole bunch of cards available, you also see ones that are not played. Not really a big coincidence. Now, we really want to talk about high random cards that are high variance and that I think are really bad for the game. You actually have to look at the classic set for some of the worst offenders. Ragnaros can hit a 1/1 Divine Shield or a Totem, or it can hit face, or it can hit their giant. I mean, come on, these are huge ranges with very little that goes into it. Sure, sometimes you can choose to play it at a better time where it lowers the randomness, because usually lower randomness is better for you. What about Sylvanas? Same thing. Which one did you steal? What about Brawl? He decides to play an Armorsmith and Brawl, and I've got 4 minions out. If any of my 4 win, I can Powered Shield, Divine Spirit, Enter Fire, and win the game, but oh, his Armorsmith won. That's happened to me more times than I can count. That is high variance randomness. Again, sometimes you can just brawl into their whole board, and as long as only one lives, you're okay with it because you got an Execute or a Weapon Charge or whatever that you need. In any case, that is higher variance. So, what does all this randomness do? Does it actually make people hate the game? I mean, I guess so. There's definitely some people out there that seem to, sorry for the meme, be really salty about randomness. But I think we need to accept this is human bias. This is a glass that's half empty rather than half full, because the reality is it's zero sum that there's good random and bad random. If I have Ragnaros hit my face with a 1 in 6 and I'm super upset that I just got cheated by randomness, someone else just played the Ragnaros thinking, come on, hit face, and they're pretty pumped that they just got that win. Every time it's good for someone, it's bad for their opponent, and vice versa. We can be as biased and salty as we want, but that doesn't change the reality of the probabilities. I personally have had a lot of really cool random things that have happened throughout my games playing Hearthstone, and I enjoy it. I think that it's good that way. Speaking of experience, Mean Streets of Gadget Zan was perhaps one of the worst time periods ever. I think a lot of people think that. I actually quit during it. But when we look at these cards, they're not high random. When we look at these cards, we don't even see a random Druid card. We see some random Hunter cards with hand buff stuff, but they weren't even played. Mage was what? Greater Arcane Missiles? And then a bunch of consistent cards. Paladin has that, but I mean, come on. And then a bunch of consistent cards. Their hand buff hits the whole hand. Priest has some Discover and not much random. Rogue has one of the most random cards here with Shaku. Okay, give it that there's a random card there. The rest are consistent. Finders Keepers I don't think was played much. Devolve was consistent, but random. It was consistently good because you didn't need something crazy. You needed to hit that Gadget Zan, and whatever, you were happy. You needed to hit that buff something, whatever, you were happy. I don't think Lotus Legionist was played much. As we go on, again, we see a few random cards, but I think that they're not very many. Or they are not very good. What really happened, though, was we had a few decks that were very consistent, very not random. You knew exactly what to expect by turn 15 from a Jade deck. From a Druid deck, you knew what to expect. From a Shaman Jade deck, you knew what to expect. It was a little bit different. And from these notorious Pirate decks, we knew what to expect early on. It was consistency that made this one of the worst time periods in Hearthstone's history, not randomness. It was perhaps one of the lowest random times ever. On the flip side, we've got Ungoro, which is full of Discover and randomness. And yet, it's arguably one of the best times ever. So, I don't know. Randomness seems alright to me here. Now there is bad randomness, as I touched on, and then there's this good randomness that I'm trying to get at. But, you know, there's a whole spectrum, right? There's cards in between. In the middle, we have cards like Babbling Book. You don't make a choice on the Discover. The variance is higher because there's not 3 that you take the best of, so it's very easy to get a very bad spell. So it is higher variance, all these types of cards. But is that what makes them bad? Maybe it adds a little bit to that. But why are these cards so good in Arena? Why are these cards so played? I don't think it's because of the randomness that, oh, they're random so they must be good cards, because most random cards are bad cards. What makes them good cards is that their stats are relatively fair, and then they give something in the long run. Relatively fair stats, something in the long run that's random. Relatively fair stats, and something in the long run that's better than random. It's better than Tortolan Forager. We've really got to keep in mind, where is the randomness the problem, or where is it just that it generates too many resources? It's got too much long-term value while still giving enough tempo early on. These are the cards that I think are really strong right now that are breaking Arena, are cards that are tempo neutral, we'll say. Maybe they're not amazing tempo, but they're decent tempo, and they generate late value. Now, there's a side effect that a lot of them are random, but this is a pretty good example right here of one that is not random. Now, one last thing about Heroic Brawl, in fact. I'm going to go back to Crip's video. He touched on this idea that people hated this Heroic Brawl because of whatever, and he brought up this table and said, oh, there's only 80 people that said they liked it, but let's be honest, they were lucky. They had a 20% win rate, and they lucked out with their 20% win rate, and how are we even supposed to trust it? Basically, no one liked this. Well, I don't think that's telling the whole story. So we've got the negative binomial distribution, which will tell us basically what are the odds that these people with a 20% win rate actually went 12-3 like he thinks. Well, this is right here is a 20% win rate. It's an 80% loss rate. The odds of someone going 9-3 are... He only had a sample size of 1,200, by the way. So let's not even look at 9-3. That didn't happen with those people if they had a 20% win rate. In fact, 3 out of those 1,000 people, maybe 4 because it was a little higher, went 5-3. Maybe 1 went 6-3. That's with a 20% win rate. Alright, fine. Maybe it's higher. Maybe it's a 40% win rate. Well, even then, still not even one person went 12-3. Probably one went 11-3. Maybe one went 10-3. Three went 9-3. That's not the 70 people he got. Again, just showing how bad people are at truly judging the odds. So, at the end, I want to say that I started out with how much random is too much random. We all have to answer this for ourselves. But the reality is that in a card game, drawing cards out of your deck is more random than anything else. The most randomness you'll see is not from cards that say random, it's from cards that require something else in your hand from your deck. Cards like Mirage Collar. Cards like Auctionized Soul Priest with a Circle combo. That is far more random, far higher variance than a Discover card. I'm not sure I know exactly where too much randomness is. Brawl is one of my least favorite cards in the entire game, but I don't think that Discover is quite as bad as everyone says it is. Maybe not everyone says it is, but as people are complaining. The variance is usually lower, and people just get salty over it. People just are looking at it in the most negative light possible. Anyway, thanks for listening. Bye.